Hey everybody, this is Feng Zhu and welcome to episode 56, which is actually a pre-recorded video I've done for the magazine ImagineFX did this about 2 months ago. So I hope that's okay with you guys because we are quite busy, as you can tell by the lack of updates recently. Hopefully new stuff will be coming, but we've been working on quite a bunch of new developments, which I'll be announcing actually a little bit in this quick audio. I'll mention some of it as well. But I'd like to first thank you guys for writing in all the cool comments you guys did of episode 55, in which I asked you guys to write in sort of your background, your education, what you currently do. And it's really neat to see such diversity within our audience. So anyways, I hope that I'll be working on some new episodes shortly. No promises yet because we are quite busy. But we do have a live workshop coming up in Singapore in September, in which I'm inviting a couple of my buddies out from the Hollywood side to demonstrate their techniques. And this is going to be I haven't announced it anywhere else except on this video actually. We're going to be probably doing marketing for it starting next week. But it's going to be a couple of guys coming out of Hollywood who has films credits such as Ridley Scott's Prometheus, Avatars, like Elysium, which is coming out next year, I think, and of course Peter Jackson's next movie called The Hobbit. So these are designers from these films coming out to do actual workshops. So instead of just having a portfolio show, these guys will be actually demonstrating their techniques. So it's a much longer period during the day as well. So it's not like a 1-2 hour thing, but pretty much a whole day thing, in which they're really sitting down. So we'll be announcing that shortly. So these are the kind of things we're planning. We also have a big workshop coming up in another country that we're currently putting it together. It takes a lot of work. So anyways, that'll come shortly as well. So I hope you guys thanks for putting up with the lack of updates, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. So all right, let's go and continue. Bye bye. Hey everybody, this is Feng Zhu and welcome to this ImagineFX video tutorial. And I'll be covering my techniques and process for creating environments for video games. In this case, the theme I've chosen is a fantasy MMORPG. And the typical kind of projects I tend to do, especially in the early phases of these kind of client projects, is to establish the overall worlds, the mood, and the colors. So during this phase, it's actually quite free form. So almost like anything goes, because the clients at this point generally do not give me any kind of detailed instructions. It's more about, hey, come up with a bunch of different worlds and let's go from there. So my goal for this tutorial is to show you guys in a very raw format. There's no pre-planning, there's no pre-drawing. It's just you're seeing exactly how I'll do this on a real product. So I'm drawing this as I go here. So the video has been sped up, but the process and the thinking is happening live, basically in front of you. So my goal right now is to produce as many designs as I possibly can for one day's work. So you're gonna see pretty much the same output I do for clients, which is about 4 paintings about this level through a work day. The initial 4 that I'm gonna do here only takes about 2 hours to do, and that's the initial phase. That's the phase that lacks all details but has the overall scene established. This is very helpful when you're working in-house, especially working with art directors or clients. That way, say you get in the morning at 10 o'clock, by lunchtime you already have your entire workday planned out, right? You got 4 paintings kind of established. At that point, you can make design decisions with the art director to say, like, are these the ones we go forward with? And if it is, you have the whole afternoon to get it flushed out. So this is a process that's been working quite well for myself. I basically do this for every project I'm on, including the one I'm working on currently, which is not this is a demo, but I'm actually on a real project right now that I'm doing the same exact process, but it's not fantasy based. So, but the process is the same. Anyways, so this is quite raw. When I first started this, I really didn't have a overall idea of what I'm about to do, except I wanted to start with a brown color to give it a desert feel, kind of like Grand Canyon, Utah, or Arizona, that type of environment. But of course, we don't want to draw Earth. That's kind of boring. So we flare out some of the design language to make the canyons a little bit more otherworldly, so that way the gamers could be entertained while they get into this world. So the goal here really isn't detail. It's just to establish the feeling, the color palette, and also the lighting. Now I chose a pretty I guess, what do you call it, a kind of magic hour lighting in which the sun is about a 5 to 6 p.m. On the horizon. And this helps create some long shadows as well as create nice cools in the shadows, in the shade, and nice warms where the sunlight is hitting. So this is a pretty typical setup for a lot of paintings you see out there as well. So we call that magic hour, the time between about 5 p.m. to where the sun goes down the horizon. That entire time period is very, very good for painting. Essentially it makes it a little bit easier because we have the cool and warms to play with, right? Some of the hardest time to paint, it will be like midday, noon, because your sun is straight up. Your shadows have no shadows, everything is going casting straight down. So that kind of stuff is a little bit hard to describe form. For example, a cylinder will be very hard to describe midday, noon, okay? Versus a magic hour, you have the nice cores in the shade and your warms on the highlight side. So, and that's the lighting scheme I'm used for all four of these. As far as setup goes, this is actually just one PSD file with a black kind of bar on a different layer, and that helps kind of separate each of the frames out. But this is not some special setup because I've seen on my YouTube channel people asking how do I set up this 4 canvases. It is not 4 canvas, it's just a single canvas with a cross basically on a different layer. And that's all, right? So there's nothing special. I'm also using almost completely entirely made out of default brushes. So there's no customized brush except for some of the tree brush you see, and those I just found on the internet. But as far as the painting brush, the chalk brush, like the one you see right now, this is all default, Photoshop default. So now I'm going to my second environment, and this one, because I just done a desert environment, what's going on in my head right at this point is, hey, I got to do something a little bit different. We don't want to offer clients 4 choices and they're 4 of the same place. The whole point of an MMORPG is that the player typically gets to experience multiple versions or multiple scenarios. They go from the desert into the forest, to the swamps, to the mountains, to the volcanoes, right? You name it. And what kind of environments are they? Well, that's my job, is to provide that. And because this is high fantasy, I gotta do some stuff that the player understands, right? You cannot design different to be different. For these kind of fantasy stuff, a lot of it has been set already. A town is a town, a castle is a castle. Now, you could play around with a different design language, but as far as what they do, they're pretty set. And if you change it too much, you're actually going to alienate your major audience members, right? Too weird, because we don't do different to be different in this industry. We do design to cater to huge audiences, and that does not mean we go generic. However, that does mean we have to understand popular culture. What is the kind of stuff that sells well to gamers? What is the stuff they already understand? And you build upon that versus a total reset, right? And when products do that kind of stuff, you're taking a huge risk, and oftentimes gamers just does not respond well to those kind of designs. For example, let's make a town, but it's made out of bubble gum and and strings or something. You could try to sell that as a medieval town, but very few gamers gonna like it. They'll be like, why is this like this? It doesn't make any sense. So in this case, I'm designing kind of like a town, but the buildings are kind of Dutch or European based, but they are kind of built on top of these rock formations and canyons to just break them apart a little bit. So there's not the standardized town, but most gamers who sees this setting will understand that, oh, this is a happy town. It's got grass, it's got trees. This is not an evil place. And you'll see that I'll go from this environment into a kind of evil world as soon as I'm done with this piece, to contrast the designs. And this is the typical setup you want for your clients, so they can see, oh, I see. So this is the startup, the newbie zone or something like that, and then the other environment will be where maybe the first battle will take place or something like that, right? You give them variants, and by offering the multiple designs, you also help yourself as a designer narrow down what the clients typically likes. Because one key factor, right, and I'll share this with you guys, is that when you ask clients what they want, sometimes they don't know, but they sure do know what they don't want, right? So I hope that makes sense to you guys. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to ask clients, hey, what do you want? What do you want? First of all, when you do that, you're basically making your job harder, because then if they tell you exactly what they want, then you don't have too much imagination to put into the design. So you don't want to corner them and and force them to give you design. And most clients don't like to do that anyways. And secondly, really, they hired you to be a professional designer. It's up to you to come up with the designs. So, and back to the whole, like, they don't know what they want, but they sure know what they don't want. That is very, very true. So by offering multiple design passes, they can see like, nah, I don't like the direction this is going. I don't like the direction this is going, but we like the direction this one's going. Well, for me, that helps me narrow down. Okay, I see the clients like this kind of flavor. They like this kind of taste. They like this kind of forms. So it helps narrow down in a second pass. So the next day, when I do 4 more of these designs, I know which kind of a design language to avoid. So this kind of multiple passes is always very helpful. So anyways, let's go back to the talk about some of the setup for this. So this is all being done in Photoshop CS1, which is a very old software. I believe it's like 2001 or something like that. But software doesn't matter. I do finish this painting in CS5, but that's for a very small percent of this video. Majority of this is still being done on a laptop with CS1. So there's nothing wrong with the software. Old software, actually you could do all this in Photoshop 7. It doesn't make too much of a difference. The only thing that changes is some of the some of the layer settings, and that's about it. But Photoshop is quite powerful. I think from CS1 forward, it gets quite strong. So now I'm starting the third environment. So I just done kind of two happy worlds. The first one in the desert, I'm not sure if that's a happy place or not. In terms of like, is it a good guy or is it a bad guy? I'm not sure. The second place is definitely a good guy place because it's got the language that tells players this is not a harmful place. It's green, it's got chimneys, it's got houses. Those are typical stuff that gamers associate with a good guy's town. Now for this one, I'm purposely going to a bad guy's town, and notice I use certain forms like spikes, reds, putting the snow, nice and cold. These things, if you do your language right, will tell the player, hey, you're entering a place that is not friendly to you. This is being run by something that probably will kill you. And that's important in video game design because you've got to sell the worlds visually to the gamers. Anyway, so I'm just blocking these in. Now all these colors are just being selected randomly. I mean, it's not random, but I'm just color picking from my big swatch of colors, and sometimes I'm hand mixing these myself. So I've collected over the years a ton of colors I just like, and every time I find a nice color, I just save it into my custom palette. So right now I got about maybe 200 or so color palettes in there, and they all tend to work quite well with one another. So for example, I have the blue and the reds next to each other, so when I put those two together, they just work, and they work for characters, they work for environments, they work for props. That doesn't matter. So these are kind of colors that just balanced among themselves. So I just pick, if I want a green right now, I could pick a green that's next to one of these kind of colors, and it'll work because they have been put in a certain order for them to kind of work in union with each other. So anyways, so now I'm blocking this stuff out. At this point, I'm starting to see the design. I see that it looks like some kind of metallic castle with the kind of red iron materials, plates on the outside to protect it. So another material that is typically used to describe evil things, right? Like red iron, rust iron. These are all materials that are not typically associated with being good. So again, we're playing around with a lot of popular culture, but it's important. Video game, especially the kind of projects I work on, are mostly aimed at your millions of players type of audience, and they expect a certain thing. And if you don't deliver it sort of to what they already see in their heads, well, they're gonna be like, hey man, that doesn't make any sense, or this game doesn't look that cool, whatever. So you have to play up some of that, but of course you have to inject your personal design language into it, which I've done here. I've injected the towers and the spikes, and that's my personal take. So it's not a medieval Tolkien castle sitting in the snow, which will be very, very raw kind of fantasy. It's kind of things you've seen many times. But the essence of it actually is exactly the same. The feeling this one gives off is the same feeling that you put a black, very dark castle on the snow. It actually gives the gamers the same vibe. So we just try to provide that kind of feeling, but without using a stereotypical castle. So at least that's my goal here. Okay. And you'll see that as I go forward here, I'm going to try different design passes, and some of them I just don't like. I'm going to reject them. I end up with about 6 paintings actually, but I'm going to reject 2 and keep 4. So this is very typical of my workflow because as a freelance designer, I don't have art directors watching my back all the time. In fact, I only talk to them once a week. So I have to do a lot of self art directing. When you're working in-house, it's a little bit easier because you could just call over your art director and tell them, hey, look, I'm working on this right now. What do you think? And at that point, they can already decide, hey, let's go forward with this. What kind of changes do we make? Makes the job flow a little bit easier. But the benefit for freelance is that you tend to have more freedom, because no one tells you what to do for the whole week. So you kind of have to just make stuff up and hopefully cross your fingers that they like it. So there's positives and negatives to working in-house and freelance, and that's really up to you on which career path you prefer. But since this is a tutorial, let's not talk too much about the job scope. Let's focus more on the workflow itself. So now I'm starting a 4th image. At this point, my brain started to get burned out. So doing concept art is actually quite exhausting because you're burning so much brain cells doing this current process, and you're thinking the whole time. You're problem solving. You're thinking about not only the design, but you also have to draw it well, right? So both things have to work together. So at this point, I'm thinking like, what do I do? What kind of environment do I do? So I'm kind of wandering around. You can just see me bum around with this design quite a bit. At the end of it, I actually never come up with a design I like. So this painting actually gets rejected very shortly. So because for me, I trust my gut instinct quite a bit. When something doesn't come together, within the first maybe 10 to 20 minutes, I tend to reject it, which sometimes is not a good thing, but that's just my own personal workflow. I find that if I reject it and start something fresh, it gives me something more interesting than trying to force a design to come out, no matter what. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't try to go down that road because just by doing freelance for so many years, I find that it's so much easier to start fresh than to force a design to work. So because when I force it, I never liked the design in the first place. So you're always constantly fighting your own conscience. Your conscience saying this is not good, this is not good, this is not good. But then the worker inside you saying like, yeah, but there's a deadline, there's a deadline, there's a deadline. You gotta make it good. But the whole time you're going through this personal battle. For me, it's like just destroy the other one, the one that keeps telling you to work on it, and just start fresh. And therefore, there's no battle. You just start from a clean slate. So this painting at this point, I already hate it. I just go, man, this looks pretty dumb. It doesn't really have an epic flow to it. It doesn't have the vibe that I'm going for. The MMORPG. It doesn't feel like a place I will want to go see as a player, right? So one of the methods I use during design is I try to put myself there. So I do tend to look at a lot of video games. I don't play too many games, but I do basically buy them off Steam and try them out for about half an hour. So I know most of the games. I say about 90% or more of the games out there. I've played them. So what I do with these is that when I design them, I try to put myself there. It's like, what am I seeing as a player? What's around me? What's the smell? What's the lighting? What's the sound I hear? And you try to imagine that. And if it's not working, then it's not going to work in a game either. So for the previous three, I could sort of see myself in them. I could hear the birds singing, the green one, the butterflies flying around, and there's people in the town. There's a lot of ambient noise. For the snow one, there's snowing. You hear the hush wind. You hear some wolves howling in the distance or something, right? You could start believing the environment. For this one, I couldn't feel it. There's no temperature here. I'm not feeling like, is this a cold environment? Is this a warm environment? Couldn't really tell. So, and that gives me more headaches in terms of flushing this painting out. So right now I'm just bumming around. See, I'm adjusting the colors and stuff. Not really sure where I'm going. So after a while, it's like, forget it. Let's just throw it away and start another one. And you can see here, I've dumped it because it just wasn't working, and I start something else. So I'm thinking, hey, I haven't done water yet. I've done snow, I've done desert, I've done kind of a temporal forest with green grass and trees. Let's do something with water and maybe something like a misty mountain. And there's those places in China that has this. I don't know what province, but they have those cool little mountains that has trees growing right off the cliffs, and they're always surrounded in this nice hazy fog. So I thought, hey, let's do something maybe similar to that. Give the players a chance to see that in the game. So that's the kind of the approach. And at this point, I'm still not finding it because I just came off a painting that didn't work, and your morale always kind of gets destroyed to a certain percent when that happens because you know that you wasted 20 minutes, 30 minutes trying to flush something out, and that kind of thing it's unrecoverable. Time is gone. So right now I'm still trying to recover from the loss of time. So I'm kind of painting without too much thinking, still kind of recalling the other paintings, seeing can I save it or what. By this point, I'm starting to feel it. One way to kind of get the overall feel is to blur your vision. So when I'm painting these, for example, you can do that right now, is step back from the screen a little bit and just blur your eye. And you should be able to read the forms with your vision blurred. And what that does is it gets rid of the details. And makes you focus mostly on the major forms. So now I'm starting to like this piece. I'm thinking, oh, this is working. This has got the vibe. It's got that kind of the ancient China mountains range. Again, I'm sorry, I forgot the province that these mountains are located in, but it's capturing the feel I want. That kind of misty, definitely very cold in this environment here. You got these kind of harsh rock formations with this very cold lake. So the temperature here is always in the cool ranges. So I'm also going to cool off my colors, and then I'm going to have that 5 o'clock sun hit downtown or whatever the castle in the middle is, right? So for these MMORPGs, which this is probably a good time to talk about it, you have to lead the players into your scenes. Unlike a movie design, movies are basically 120 minutes of a slideshow. The directors is controlling everything you see on screen. Every single frame is controlled by the directors and the editors and the visual effects people. So you cannot wander off frame. You cannot look right. You cannot look left. We control that. But in a video game, you don't have that kind of control. A gamer could actually wander into a corner, or go down the wrong path. And for video games, you don't want to do that kind of designs. You don't want to frustrate them. So obviously, for these sandbox games, these open world games, you want them to explore. But there's a big asterisk at the end of that explore. You have to lead them to certain areas. So for settings like this one, I'm actually trying to lead you into the town, right? By putting a tower, by putting something with a high color contrast, by putting a road or a pathway. Because games could get very confusing if you don't lead them. They just wander in circles or wander into areas that has no interest point. So in video games, we always try to give you, yes, there's a certain freedom to the open world, but that freedom is heavily being controlled visually by the designers, by us, right? We give you certain lighting cues, we give you certain color palettes to help you flow through the scene so you know where to go. Here, so you can see this, the last thing I'm working on here. You notice that there's a castle in the far distance, sort of middle of a screen, and that's where I want you to go as a game player. Okay. So here I'm kind of flipping back between images. So I've created a new canvas here, and I try to put all the paintings together to see, like, does that work? I'm still trying to think, like, do I do one more painting? And I actually start another one, okay? Because I gave myself about 2 hours to do all 6 of these. And I still got about 20 minutes at this point left. So I go, hey, might as well do another piece. And by this point, my brain is pretty much shut down. I'm already 5th painting in at this point. But since we got time, let's just try to push it through. So that's my own personal workflow. This is the way I've been working for many, many years. And I like to work within some kind of constraint, deadlines, time period, whatever, because it helps me push designs out. So versus like, let's take a break and do something else. Like, hey, I got 20 minutes left. Let's use that 20 minutes up as originally planned. So it might not work for everybody. Everybody has to find their own work method. There is no method that works for every, for universal code or something like that. You have to find which process do you enjoy the most when you're working, and gives you the most creative freedom as you work. The unfortunate thing in our business is that everything is controlled by deadline, especially for us who are working freelance. There's always a date coming up, a time coming up. So we have to control our time very, very carefully. We cannot just simply, hey, I'm going to spend 10 hours on this painting, another 20 hours on another painting. It doesn't work as freelance because clients generally want stuff within days, within hours sometimes. So if they want 4 paintings within a day, then that pretty much puts it to 2 hours per painting. Right? So if you go into 3 hours per painting, now you just ate up the time for the other 3 paintings. So you gotta be very, very careful. So for me, I give myself a freelance deadline for this project, which was before noon. I need to have minimum of 4 paintings, hopefully 6. So that's why I'm hitting the 6th one at this point. So now this design at this point, I'm sort of liking it. I'm sort of not liking it. The reason why I don't like it is because it kind of looks like the one on the left side of it, right? It's also green. It's got the green grass. So I'm thinking, what am I delivering that's new here to the clients? Because if I'm just offering a variation of the one on the left, then might as well just delete this one and make the left one better, and offer 4 paintings that are somewhat finished versus 6 paintings and or even 5 paintings, and having the 5th one pretty much be the same as the one to its left. There's no purpose to that, and you're just wasting client time. So, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to make the clients feel like they're paid for something that they need to pay for. So, and eventually you see that I'll scrap this painting as well. Okay, let's see, anything else technical? These are pretty low res at this point. I'm working only at I think about 4,000 pixels wide, which makes each painting only 2,000 pixels. That's very, very low, but that's good because you want to start with a small file. You don't want to make your Photoshop all slow and start with a 10,000 pixel painting. But by the time I get all these knocked out, I would res this up to about 9,000 pixels, which makes each painting about 4,500 pixels wide. And that's plenty for a semi-rough design that is plenty of resolution, because none of these paintings I'm going to take to an ultra finish, meaning that they're for marketing or something like that. They're taken to a end of day finish. So it's like, just imagine this is a typical work day. You start at 10 a.m. So I'm looking at about 6:30 p.m. going home. That's what we end up with: 4 paintings flushed to the best of my abilities within that time period. And the first 2 hours in the morning is used up doing this. The later 6 hours is going to be devoted into finishing work. No, actually less than six, about 5 hours, about an hour each. That's pretty typical. That's the kind of the same time period I'm currently using for the project I'm on. And I'm also delivering to my clients about 4 paintings a day. So, and that's a lot of pressure on that. But the industry is tough. There's a lot of guys doing this kind of stuff. There's a lot of guys who are very very fast. So if you want to stay in the kind of the upper food chain, in the client or freelance world, you have to produce high quantity at the same time high quality. Just really isn't a way around it. So because if you're slow, the clients will go to someone who's fast, unfortunately. So. Okay, at this point, I'm starting to flush this stuff out. So you can see that I still got all 6 paintings on the canvas. Even the ones I didn't like, it's still on there because I didn't have time to just take them out. I just kind of leave them because maybe it'll grow on you. I don't know. So I kind of left it. And at this point, I'm starting to detail out what each environment actually does, because right now most of these are still lacking human inhabitants. So at this point, I have to put in stuff that gives you that human scale. What's here. And for this desert environment, I actually started with a kind of cowboy kind of town, but halfway through I just felt that doesn't feel right. This is a fantasy RPG, and this is looking too much like a cowboy setting, which destroys the fantasy feel and puts it in a kind of different class. So I definitely don't want the old west showing up in an RPG. So I mean, at least not in this version, right? You could definitely have it in certain type of games, but for my version here, I didn't want that to be introduced. So here you see that I changed the architecture to be a little bit more fantasy based. These kind of cloth or tent construction, which they're kind of building these things to block the sun out. I imagine this kind of places are quite hot, so these guys are going to build these high roofs to let the air come in, and everything is kind of airy, so all the roofs are not really sealed. You're not going to get too much rain in these locations, so I don't have to worry about covering the roofs up or keeping the place nice and warm because it's already hot. So let's just keep it very tent-like, but the structure is quite big, right? These are pretty massive structures. Probably about 5 stories tall, that has multiple levels within it. So we got a little bit of a kind of a American Indian type of construction, except it's just on a much bigger scale. But the materials I could see being very similar: leather, skin from animals and stuff like that is doing the construction for these. And those kind of things at this point I don't have to worry too much about. And that's the next phase. So which is not in this video. It's the kind of phase in which the clients approve the design, and then we go to actual production with this concept art. And at that point, we'll probably bring in line drawings and also materials pass, in which we extract one of these drawings and do a separate drawing indicating exactly how it's made, exactly how it's built. But during this phase, it's not necessary because you don't want to be wasting time doing designs that are not necessarily going to make the first cut, right? So all these 4 I'm ready to sacrifice. Now in the freelance world, these 4 could all be cut down, and it doesn't matter. That's the whole point of doing these paintings, and the whole point of doing so many of them is that you hope that one of these makes the cut, so then you could refine. And then imagine the next day do another 4, next day do another 4. Within a week, you got 5 days, you could produce what, 20 paintings, right? So 20 paintings is a lot of choices, and if those 20, all we need to do is narrow down a few, maybe 3, maybe 4. And the following week, we could take those 4 and start to flush them out. And that's how game worlds are typically created, especially for us freelancers. In-house, you tend to have a little bit more time to flush the worlds out. So for us, we have to rush through these because the typical time period we stay on a project is anywhere from 2 months to maybe 6 months. Sometimes on a longer project, you could be on a project for over a year. Be on contract for an entire year, but that's quite rare. Most of the stuff I get on are generally in about 2 to 3 month time period, and during that time period, you are pumping out hundreds of designs. So yeah, I like to work fast. I like to work in high production, a lot of volume. At the same time, you don't want to sacrifice quality too much, but we're not competing with the illustration in which some of the paintings get very, very refined. We just simply don't have that kind of luxury in terms of time for freelance. And those are also the projects I don't take on myself. I like to keep my stuff high level, very suggestive in a way to help get the project kickstarted to help the team see the vision of this product. And from that point on, they could bring on additional artists to do the flushing. So I typically don't end up doing that kind of stuff myself. So which is good, it keeps it kind of in the fun stage only. But in the beginning of my career, I definitely had to do a lot of not only the high-end stuff, but the labor-intensive cleanup drawings. So and some artists like that kind of stuff, some don't. So for me, it doesn't really matter, I guess. But if I have the choice, then I'll definitely like to do the high level brainstorming phase of the projects because they are the most fun in terms of for a designer. Okay. So anyways, back to detailing. So I got rid of the cowboy town, as you can see, they're kind of gone. And for all of these, I'm going to insert textures, and that'll take place after all four of them are brought to this level. I will do a texture pass. Now, I'm not going to record the entire process because that'll just make this video extremely long. So I skip some of the finer detail stuff because you can find that either in the previous ImagineFX video or go to my YouTube channel and find it there as well. So the purpose of this is really to show you how I start this. And this is really, these four paintings what you're seeing is some of the most important steps in the process of design, which is the early establishing shots, the forms, the lighting, and the mood. Once you have that, detail is not that hard to do. Detail is just a matter of time. If you have 2 hours, you got 2 hours to do detail. You got 4, you got 4 hours. But the first 20 minutes, man, that is key because if you have nothing on paper after 20 minutes or even after a half an hour, then you're gonna have a stressful day at work because you have nothing to show. For us as designers, the core content the client's looking for, they're looking for the idea. So, and that's what these four are essentially trying to capture at a very quick, very fast production speed, I should say. And that's the focus of this tutorial. As far as how to do details, there's really nothing much to that. It's just slowing down, put on some music, and draw and paint. If it's a rock, paint the rock formations. If it's cloth, you paint the cloth. But the major structure and the major forms has already been done at this point. So, and this is for me is the hardest part of production. This is the part that burns the most brain cells because you are constantly correcting, altering, and fixing, and change your design to fit the vision you want for yourself as well as you hope for your clients as well. So the detail phase is the actual most relaxing phase. So that's the phase where you can almost shut your brain off because you could put it on autopilot. Especially once you've done this enough, painting a rock or painting a building becomes kind of it kind of paints itself. You know what's happening. So you're not worried too much about design at that point. So yeah, this part here, this is all brain stuff. You're seeing me using up a lot of thinking at this phase, like what's the formation like, what is the rock structure like. That is all very important during this phase. So also this phase, I'm also blurring my vision quite a bit. You could try that as well right now. So you can see, you could blur your vision, and you can see I'm trying to put in the bounce lights from the main light source. The light source is coming in from the left side, about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, somewhere around that horizon, and it's leaving these long shadows from these towers across the desert floor. And that also gives you kind of pockets of interest for the player. There is a path you can see from the left that leads into the scene, and that path is being cut by a series of shadows. And those will make the game world a little bit more interesting as a player journeys from one setting to another as they cross that threshold of shadow into light. That feels good on the camera. That feels good on the players. They could perhaps see their weapon go into light or see part of their armor go into light from their hands, and that creates nice, just nice visual cues to the players, like they feel like they're part of the world. If they're going from scene A to scene B and there's no change in lighting on themselves, the world feels a little bit flatter. So you want to create these areas that provides that kind of feedback or visual feedback. And in this environment, it's the same thing. The shadow area below this little arch will also create the same effect, in which the player is walking from sunlight into shade, back into sunlight, and that's going to have a direct effect, a real-time effect on the player models themselves, right? So games have come a long way since the days I started, right? I started with Wing Commander Prophecy, which is what, 1996, 1997. So at that time, we didn't have any luxuries like what we have today. There was no real-time shadows. The poly count was something like the 300 polygons for entire characters. So nowadays, poly count almost is not that much of an issue anymore. Now we're down to like memories for a skeletal system or something like that, right? You're getting some high-end restrictions from that point of view. As far as poly count, I'm not getting that from clients anymore at all. No client complains about cylinders or spheres or anything like that. It's because it's so, most video cards today could push whatever. So then that opens up a lot of freedom as for concept artists, because we could pretty much draw whatever we want, and the game engines could render it. So now it's really up to you on what you want to create. So and but for if you're getting into the games, I'm sure some of you guys perhaps are students and want to enter the video game industry. You do have to know how games work. Now, of course, you don't want to get addicted to them. You don't want to use your own products, because games are highly addictive products. But you want to load them up, take a look, see what the engines are capable of doing, what kind of graphics are being done in today's games, and you want to then implement that into your designs. So you don't do stuff that looks dated or stuff that is behind the times in terms of technology. So currently, things like HDR, depth of field, bloom, physique, class simulation, these are all things that game engines are doing very well. Also bump mapping, procedural tessellation, these are all type of stuff that we want to work into the concept art itself, so the 3D artists know which kind of technology they can implement already into your scenes. So things like balanced lights and reflectivity, specular lighting, these are all things all game engines are pretty much capable of doing nowadays. So anyways, now I'm starting adding more interest points. So I also have a path that's also playing up the shadows. So the gamer's gonna, I guess, exit out from a shadow forest into a area bathed in warm light against this green grass, and that should feel pretty good in terms of walking from point A to point B. And from there, they could either go into the house to the right, or they could go underneath a bridge and experience another shadow pass and go into another area of light. And that helps separate this kind of environment out and gives players a nice feeling that they're part of the world, right? Instead of a 3D model that's floating across the world and they have no basically interaction with the environment they're in. So, and these are all things that as a concept artist you have to be quite aware of what exactly are you designing, what are you providing for the clients. So here, and by the way, all this entire painting, I don't use layers for my paintings. At most, I use one layer for the volumetric fog or the value adjusting, but most of the time, I'm just painting very raw. And that's a personal technique because, again, everybody has their own way of working. Some like to have many layers, some don't like to have layers. It doesn't matter. It's up to how you like to paint. For me, I don't like to work with layers because I find that by not having layers, you have the paint stack up. So, and that gives you a certain look to your paintings. So. And by the way, whenever you see like kind of the Photoshop spazzing out, that is because this has been time compressed, and I'm during that time I'm scrolling the image left and right, and because you compress time, you can only capture one frame of the perhaps 30 frames it takes to scroll left to right. So you're seeing an image flash on screen, which looks like a video issue, but it's just the frame rate is not high enough to capture all that movement. So now I'm on the snow one, and for this one, we're making it look evil. So we're going spiky, a very easy way to sell evil. So, and also we're selling red. So these kind of things are just built into the perception of gamers. So when they see this kind of world, I don't think very few gamers are going to treat this as a friendly kind of place. You can, you could use a dialogue, you could use some kind of backstory to establish the scene as being friendly, but you don't need to in this case. We're purposely making this place bad. So. Let me see if there's any other technical stuff I should mention here. At this point, it's still not resed up. We're still dealing with a 2000 pixel wide image, and that keeps the file relatively small. This entire image here is only about, I think, 180 megs, which is very small. Later, once you res it up, it's going to increase into maybe the 200 to 300 range. So. For me, I like to keep these files small. That way, you can work on laptops. You don't have to be inside the office. You could just take your laptop in whatever you want and work on them. Bigger files, even the most powerful laptops out there have a hard time with large PSD files, which will make the working process slower. So unless you absolutely need to, you don't need to res your files up. 2000 pixels is plenty of space to put in very high level details actually. So I mean that's already HD resolutions, so it should be plenty. All right, so continue to paint. As far as design goes, let me see if there's anything else I should mention. So my goal here is to produce this at the end of the day to show the clients, and variety is important in terms of color. location, mood, lighting. We try to vary those as much as we can from one scene to another. So for here, I'm doing a high altitude type of lighting. So you're getting a very clean sky, very blue because we're up high. So a lot of the clouds, the cumulus clouds and stuff like that, tend to be gone at this high altitude. They're all, they kind of sustain themselves. They turn to snow. So we replace that with a very thin kind of stratosphere kind of clouds that happen up at maybe 10,000 feet or up or so. So these are all kind of the things you could do, and you could tell your clients what your design goal were when you're designing this. You could tell them, hey, this should be high altitude. So we get up there, make sure the game engine doesn't run the cumulus clouds, and even though the clouds do get that high, cumulus could go up to like 50,000 or some insane altitude. But you want to change the environment around, so when the gamers are walking from one location to another, they are experiencing something completely new. And in MMO games, you're actually not creating realistic proportions, right? In the real world, to walk from a green, lush forest into the mountains would probably take you an entire day, maybe entire week. But in the game world, that takes sometimes 20 minutes. So you're trying to shift major environmental worlds within a 20-minute walk. And to do that, you have to play up a lot of different visual cues. The game engine itself has to recognize where the players are and switch those visual cues out as you travel. So maybe in the forest world, you're starting out with very puffy, very nice white clouds. And as you travel nearest this place, we're going to switch those particles out or textures out and replace it with thin clouds. And you try to do that and hint that during the concept art phase. So during production, they go, oh yeah, I see, this place has a different cloud pattern than the previous place and stuff. So everything I try to do at this during my design phase is to provide as much information as I possibly can to the team that's going to be looking at this drawing, right? You're not doing this for yourself. You're doing this for, potentially a handful of people, designers, producers, art directors, obviously. That you want them to get excited, and you also want this to be talking points. A concept art, especially during this early phase, is meant to keep the conversation going. If the conversation stops, most likely it's going to take you off the project because you're not helping contribute to the growth of the product. If you keep it kind of this high level, relatively tight but not extremely tight, this kind of has a lot of dialogue because designers could look at these paintings and start discussing. It's like, hey, maybe this is the abandoned fort where the evil guy took over, or it could be maybe a very maybe production. This place makes rare armor or something. You keep it open like that. So you let the game designer decide exactly what they want to do with this world versus providing 100% solid information. You want to keep it somewhat open, right? You suggest the overall mood, the feeling, but you let them, you let the team kind of decide together what the space is meant to be. For example, in this image as well, we obviously have a lake and a castle, but this could be maybe a friendly village somewhere, or it could maybe be a place in which you could acquire strange magic or something. So that's all up to the designers. But when I'm doing these, I do have somewhat of a story. So for me, this is a port city of some kind because you have water. Then you can have boats. So port cities generally deal with trade. So perhaps in a video game, this will be a trading town in which you get a lot of rare things, either food items or armor or whatnot, that only appears in this trading town. And from this town, they make their way into the rest of the continent. They make themselves inland, basically. So if you want the best stuff for the cheapest prices, you go to this port town. Now, when I do this concept art, that stuff might not get carried across into the real game. That's the kind of stuff I do for myself. I mentally make these notes, so when I paint, I believe in the world myself, because I find it very hard to design something when I don't even believe it myself. So I'm actually trying to design this with some backstory in mind. So anyways, this is which painting am I on now? This is about the third one I'm cleaning up, right? There's another one. Actually, this is about it. I'm actually going to start deleting these ones. You see that I actually start working on these quite a bit, but I don't like the direction these are going, so they get deleted pretty quick. For the rest of the video, I'm actually going to fast forward and show you guys what they look like with textures on board. And the video is going to spaz a little bit because I'm shifting the camera left and right, and it gets kind of crazy to watch. But the Photoshop files should be on this video, so you guys can open that up in Photoshop and take a look at yourself to see how these got started. But pretty soon I'll show you guys the texture phase, right? And that process, each one took about an hour and a half to do. So you combine all of them together, that's about, roughly with some breaks in between, about 6 hour process. So 6 to 2 put together, that's a perfect work day, and that's a good way to end your workday, right? To give drop off clients for semi production ready paintings. So, and if you could produce at that kind of level, you're going to be quite productive within a studio. That's quite competitive in terms of output and quality. And your clients or even your art director, if you're working in house, is pretty much going to keep you on the project if you are capable of producing at that level. So, and for us freelance guys, it's almost a must. Okay. So at this phase, I'm still working on these to see like, are they going to work? Are they not? Give it a few more minutes. If not, because this phase is still relatively quick. This is within each one I spent about 10, 15 minutes. That's it. So at that point, I sacrifice it. I don't like it. So you see now, sorry for the spazzing. This is me spazzing, moving the camera too quick. Anyways, you can see that these have been textures, and I've started to put high level details on them. And I'm using also black and white to balance. But this phase I'm not going to cover too much in this video because this is something that you can watch many times on my YouTube channel. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video tutorial, and if you have questions, maybe requests and stuff, you can find me on my Facebook page, or you can find me on YouTube. What the channel is actually FZD School, so just go to YouTube/FZD School, and there are already 53, 54, somewhere around there, different episodes on there that covers everything from some of the basics of design to some advanced rendering skills. So a lot of stuff show up there, so I hope you guys enjoy this and give it a try. Maybe give yourself the same spec of designing for an MMORPG and start with maybe 3 rough environments and try to block them out and see how far you get, and use this tutorial to guide you along. So again, thanks for watching, and make sure you guys check out the PSD files found on the video. So hopefully I'll see you guys next time, and I'll catch you guys in my YouTube channel. Okay, so until then, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Okay, bye bye.